Sweet lemons.
Okay, Daniel.
Hello.
We've had so many technical difficulties.
No worries.
So we're going to do this for the third time.
Cool.
Okay. Thank you for coming
No
down.
worries.
Even though I've thanked you already, I just want to make sure you understand my thanks.
No worries.
Can you just tell the people of
Yeah?
the audience what you do and who you are, just generally?
Yeah, so I'm Daniel Harris. I'm born and raised Brightonian, so I'm from this wonderful city on the south coast of England. I, as I said just before, I was born in the Thatcherite years, so I'm an 80s kid. And in Brighton Hove back in those days, it was an interesting city to live in. There was lots of deprivation. And I grew up sort of in a council house, so that would be sort of my upbringing. So it was sort of like in a council estate, but it was in an area. It's now more of a student area, but Morsecombe, you know Morsecombe.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I sort of grew up in the 80s, and both my parents were care experienced. So they'd been in care and stuff. So definitely an interesting sort of upbringing, but really sort of. Definitely I learned a lot of stuff from that, because when you grow up in those sorts of environments where you're deprived in the sense that the system deprives you, so but you're not deprived in terms of love or or community, because you have a lot of that in and around you. So I always remember sort of in those days really just lots of people coming in the house, and and we were doing, we'd always go out. My dad would take me to football, and that's kind of why I'm into Brighton Hove Albion now. I love Brighton Hove Albion. It's a massive passion of mine. And then, so like, my homelessness story, I mean, unfortunately, I kind of had to talk to about this, but it's important in terms of the homelessness story, really. But basically, from the age of 4 to 6, I was sexually abused. So I was a victim of sexual abuse. So this happened on multiple occasions. The perpetrator, it wasn't just me, it was other people that were involved as well. So it was quite impactful from my perspective, from a child perspective, because that went on to affect me quite a lot in my life, really, and sort of make me sort of raise questions and stuff like that. Because although there was a court case in 1990 after I told my parents, I don't know if anyone knows, but in Morsecombe in those days, it's most famous for the Babes in the Wood murders, which were 2 young girls who were raped and killed by Russell Bishop, who was a prolific predator. And this happened in the late 80s. So mine happened 1990, basically, when I told my parents. So although this went to court, obviously I didn't have a voice in that. And although the person got a conviction, there was only one charge on the table. And this was 1990. So you never had in the law something called the double jeopardy rule, which is where you can take them back to court again. So that just sort of, I was left with just sort of questions in my head, really, sort of, and then we then moved over to another estate. This is where it sort of happened, where it ended actually, which is on the White Hawk estate, ironically, and that has a massive problem still today with lots of sexual offenders and stuff that goes on in the community. So there is a really dark side to Brighton Hove as well as the interesting side. And then so I've always sort of worked in sort of, I would say sort of like the private sector. So I've worked from the age of 16, and then in 2015, I saw my sexual abuser again for the first time in a long time. So, I mean, from my perspective, because obviously it happened to me, the abuse, I do find it quite strange that, we walk around the city and we can just bump into these people. Yeah. So that basically turned my life completely upside down, because at that stage I was working for Sussex County Cricket Club. So yeah, it turned my life upside down. I basically had a drug addiction at that stage. So in order to cope with what happened, sort of seeing him and the impact of that, I sort of turned to drugs. So that was what I kind of see as self-medication, really. But there was an element of I was trying to kill myself, I think, looking back. And then I overdosed on drugs, and that was a deliberate overdose. This was 2015 as well. This was a few months sort of after seeing him. And it was quite horrific, really. It was a horrific time. I didn't lose my job. I had to quit my job because it was really weird. Because I was so chaotic, I sort of lost my accommodation where I was living.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had to go and stay with some other people. So I was sofa surfing. And those were people that had drug problems. And at this stage, I was in recovery. So I was just starting to go through recovery. So I'd found a fantastic organisation in Brighton Hove called Mankind. Mm-hmm. And they do counselling for men that have been raped or sexually abused as children. So they were really influential in me, really, sort of building myself back up, really. So I had that homeless situation happening. So I approached the council, and because obviously they're drug users, and I was in therapy, in recovery for it. You know, you don't want to live around that sort of environment. So I approached the council because I was homeless. And basically, I went into Bartholomew House, which is just next to Brighton Hove Town Hall, as everybody does. I presented as homeless, and this was in 2016. And basically, the person that does the assessment for the homelessness assessment, this would be the frontline worker, she said I wasn't vulnerable enough for help for homelessness. So I was sent packing and just left, basically. So I had to go back to the house where people were taking drugs, even though I was in recovery. Mm-hmm. So that just sort of broke me down, really, because I thought to myself, firstly, I'm not to blame for anything that happened. Do you know what I mean? One, I was a child, and then, you know, whatever the system is for the justice system, I don't know why perpetrators were able to walk around. Like, surely, you know, the victim should have a choice about that, especially if there's multiple victims in the city, you know. So anyway, I wasn't prepared for that, and I wasn't prepared that I'd locked it all away. I didn't realise I did, and that's what post-traumatic stress disorder is. So yeah, I got diagnosed with that. Then they diagnosed me with bipolar type 2, which is a challenging thing to deal with, but also interesting as well. And that sort of helped me because I was able to sort of go and I had to go to, at that stage, because the council said no, I didn't really know anything about the law or how everything works. So like most people that present as homeless, you just sort of accept it, I guess. But at the same time, I had to find a place. So this other organisation locally called Mind Out, they advocated with me. They came along to speak to some lawyers, and they decided to take the case on. They initially said no, that I didn't have a case, and then they took that on, and then I won. And so I was all excited because I thought, brilliant, I've got some sort of stability. It's really good for me to be able to sort of work on that recovery side, you know. And at this stage as well, I'd gone back to the police because obviously there was loads more stuff that happened to me as a child. It was multiple stuff that happened, and happened over a 2-year period. So I went back to the police to try and get some sort of, you know, justice and just sort of move on. Do you know what I mean? Because I knew it hadn't been resolved, and I needed to resolve it and move on. And that was a struggle in itself, just getting the police to actually reinvestigate it, but finally got there. And then, I turned up at Percival Terrace, which is an emergency accommodation hostel in Brighton. And my first impression of this place was horrific. I walked up the stairs, it was dark, dingy. It was in an old Regency building that they've converted. So they put 52 self-contained rooms in this building, so it's really sort of dense and compact with lots of different people, lots of different challenges going on. And as I walked up the stairs, one of the doors next to the room they placed me in, the door was completely off, and the room was disgusting. I've never seen anything like it in my life. Bear in mind, I've never been homeless. Mm-hmm. Then I go into the room that they assigned me, and literally I could put my hands out from side to side and touch the walls. There was no bedding on the mattress. The mattress was bloodied. It had what looked like drug paraphernalia had been on it, so people had been burning drugs and stuff like that.
So sorry, can I ask? So is this like a council
This
place?
is private rented, so it's owned by an organisation. We call them slum landlords. Okay. So the organisation, I did some investigating actually into them. Whilst I was homeless, because I built myself up to a stage where I was like, right, that's it, I want to really look into this. And that's kind of how my blog started, actually, because it was so bad. And I just felt so demoralised, because I was like hopeful that this would be the start to sort of hopefully a recovery. Mm-hmm. And actually it was the beginning of a nightmare, because whilst I was there for 9 months, I was in that hostel. we had there was a fire. So there was a fire on the basement floor where mother and children were. So there was a fire in the building. I saw 4 people come out of that building in a body bag. So these are people that have killed themselves with suicide or drug overdose. It was just really chaotic. And one of the things that we did in this building was we built the community from this building, from this hostel, essentially, and the people that were living there, we sort of started building a community. We were going in each other's rooms, we're starting to organise, because it wasn't the sort of place you want to live. There were no peepholes on the door, so people would knock your door, you wouldn't know who's behind it. The doors weren't even secure, so people could literally push the door and break into your room. Windows wouldn't work. It was just so many things. There were one of the security guards had leaked to me images, and in the tank, the water tank in the ceiling, there were dead pigeons. And I'd actually lost 2 teeth. I got an infection in one of my teeth, and I'd lost it. I never drank the water there, but I always drank bottled water, but I brushed my teeth and got a severe infection. So I still to this day believe that came from the dead pigeons that were in the water tank. But we're talking really, really bad, and they were getting £900 a month per tenant. There's 50 there, so work it out. It's a lot of money, and that's coming from taxpayers. So you're paying that because that comes through your tax.
Yeah.
And it's just sad because, we had issues with hot water. They just put a microwave in the room. So, how are you supposed to cook, get nutrition?
Yeah.
£900
a month.
It's a lot of money, isn't it?
Wow.
Yeah.
So
and it's benefit trapped as well. You're benefit trapped. So if you've come on, for example, I had to leave the job that I was doing because I was so unwell.
Yeah.
So you're almost benefit trapped in that situation, because who would be able to go to work and then pay £900 to live in a very tiny room that you can literally put your hands out like that?
And so the funding for that is coming from the government, from taxes?
There's 2 types of funding. So there's the council funding. So the council have a contract with these providers, and that is funded via the government. So the government give grants each year to different local authorities, and because Brighton Hove have got over 2,000 people in temporary accommodation, and we've got about 500 in emergency accommodation, which is these hostels, that's part of it. There's because obviously you have a maintenance side to it as well, and a management side, so to speak, but there's no management in these buildings. There's no support workers. It's just security guards. So anyone that's got multiple health issues, these people are not trained to work with them. So this is why we're seeing a lot of people that die. But the finance is a really, really interesting point, because in Brighton and Hove, they say there's about £44 million spent just by the local council. Now, this doesn't include housing benefit, because that would be a separate thing. So we're talking a lot of money that's being pumped into this system, and it's about 85%, about 90% actually, about 90% private sector, I would say, stroke charity.
Okay. So, I mean, I guess for me, as someone who's very ignorant in this subject generally, and I think I kind of speak for a lot of people who are very ignorant about this, is I think, would it be possible for you to lay out for someone who finds himself in a bad situation, who ends up on the street? Because as well as on top of your story as well, I know I cut you in the middle, but on top of your story as well, you're someone who helps people get out of homelessness. So can you just speak about how you help people in that situation, and then explain what are the kind of things in common that you've noticed about these people?
Yeah, no worries. So I help people when I'm well. So I'm still ill, so to speak, in the sense that I still have psychiatric services, still have therapy, still have to do sort of holistic stuff in and around that, because complex post-traumatic stress disorder, people think that it's just in the mind, but it's not, because that can manifest in your body and how you hold stress in. So it's really about, I get a lot of contact from people, because when I was living in that situation, I started blogging, and that's really how people started finding me. And I'd learnt the law, and So basically from that perspective, when people become homeless, obviously my first advice would be, it depends how it happens, because the reason a lot of people are homeless because of Section 21. So this would be the private landlord that will evict somebody for whatever reason. And the first thing someone needs to do is obviously present, if you've not got the money or you can't find an accommodation elsewhere, because it's very difficult here in Brighton and Hove, you need to approach the council, especially if you've got kids, because if you've got kids, that there's a legal duty there for the council to help you. But you'd be really surprised, there's a legal duty for the council to sort of give you advice around homelessness as well, and to help prevent it as well. So there is so much stuff that the council can do. And this is because of like some really good laws and stuff that have come up with such a thing such as the Homelessness Reduction Act. That's been a really great piece of policy that basically puts a lot more sort of emphasis on the local authority to do the prevention work. So, yeah, I mean, good luck to you, because it's a challenge. It's not easy. The reason I got into it, really, as I said, was just because I was basically what they call gatekeepered. So this is where, even though they know there is a duty to help you, because they have poor mismanagement, shall I say, there's mismanagement there, they're not organised properly, and they haven't actually looked at the system as a whole, and they haven't prepared themselves. And what you're getting is you're getting wrong decisions and unfortunately gatekeeping. So lots of pushing people away. And this is why people end up, either sleeping rough or sofa surfing, because they're not given the actual duty to house people. So that's a really tough thing. And then I'd say have some ID, because one of the things that they do now at the council is, if you don't have ID when you present, they won't even see you. So, I mean, which is horrible, because if you think, a lot of people that are probably in that position probably might not have ID. And there's been cases where I've been sent with somebody to advocate for someone that's homeless at the local authority, and I've had to go round and try and find them some sort of ID, and in the end I had to go to the DWP, the job centre, and basically get something from them. And that was like 3 or 4 hours walking around just to help this person, and that didn't have to happen. They could have done the assessment there and then. So you go through an assessment, and that's where they look at your circumstances, and this is where you really have an opportunity to sort of lay out sort of everything that's happened and your situation, because what you find is you can't really get local authority housing nowadays unless it used to be that it was for everybody, frontline workers, key workers, your postmen, your teachers, deprived communities, but now it's not. You have to be vulnerable in order to qualify for local authority housing, really. So it's tough. And there are homes in Brighton and Hove, because obviously we've got 10,000 empty homes in the city. We have got homes, but the problem is, as I say, it's because of the mismanagement. We're heavily reliant on the private sector, and what they're doing now is they're pulling all of their buildings out, and they're going into Airbnb market, because they know they can get £300 per night or whatever they're charging. And we've made these organisations rich, by the way, because we've been giving them £100,000. This is the local authorities been giving them £100,000 each month, which in terms of going to a bank, that's that's a capital. And they're using that to borrow huge amounts of money, and they now, I mean, we know Van Hoestraken, who's a famous private landlord in the city and done some quite horrific things in the area. But we've got other people that are similar now, and they're basically buying up the whole of Brighton and Hove. And the people that are homeless and those tenants, they're treated disgracefully, revenge evicted. They don't get any repairs, sort of looked down upon. And then you look at, they're living in these huge £3 million mansions. Their offices have got the gorgeous glass chandeliers, and you think the squalor that people live in, and if you speak out, it's not a good system. So
I would say, like, for example, like, I think for me, the most striking thing, having moved to Brighton, is the homelessness.
Yeah.
Like, I would say I've lived in a few places in the UK, and I've never seen a place like this bad. So, like, what do you think it is about this place that makes it uniquely that people end up in this situation?
Well, obviously, it is because Brighton Hove is it is known as a party town. It is known as a tourist destination. In the summer, it is beautiful. I'm never busy in the summer. In fact, I don't really hear from people because in the summer, most homeless people are actually just enjoying themselves and not in their rooms and stuff. So actually, it's quite a good thing. But what you then get is when it gets colder, you get busy, but what you end up doing is people will come down and they do get sent down. So I mean, I've just had a case recently where he's got a local connection in Manchester. The local authority in Manchester won't take the homelessness duty for him. So what they do is they just give him a travel warrant and send him down to Brighton Hove, and he's now in supported accommodation, and this is costing us, the Brighton Hove local authority. It's costing us now because we have to take the duty. So
people actually get shipped down.
They do, yeah.
They get shipped down here because it's better to be homeless here.
We've got some really good policies in Brighton, or we did. Some of them are sort of starting to get rolled back a little bit, but we've had some really good policies in Brighton Hove, and where there's genuine homelessness, we should help people, and I do genuinely believe that everyone that's homeless is homeless, but we do need to look at local connections, because one of the issues that we're having in Brighton Hove now is because it's so popular. People that are from Brighton Hove, that have lived in working class communities their whole lives, they're now being pushed out of Brighton Hove, so essentially socially cleansed, and they're being pushed miles and miles away from support networks, and so we need to get a balance.
Of course.
But the worst thing is, we could sort this system out if there was decent management, they looked at the issue as a broad issue, and they planned for this on the long term. Over the long term, rather than what they do at the moment, which is an annual budget, and that's dictated by, like I said, mismanagement. They're not spending the money in the right way, and it's costing us as a community now. So, yeah.
So I guess for me as well, as someone again who's ignorant in the subject, and I think for a lot of people, I think the hardest thing with homelessness and people on the street is when people ask you for money, for example, or they ask you for change or whatever. Yeah. Can you speak to that at all? In that, what is number one, the right thing to do? And because there's this stereotype, this myth maybe that people who are asking for money are asking for drugs.
They might be.
But as you've
if you were homeless, what would you take to
exactly,
cope? Do you know what I mean?
That's the thing, and that's the way that I've always felt.
Especially if you lived in some of these horrible buildings,
Yeah. So what do you think about that? Do you think
it's horrible because at the moment, obviously, cash machines are disappearing everywhere.
Yeah.
Our society is changing, so we're not cash based as much as we used to be. So I recognise that I have a lot less change in my pocket, and I feel really guilty when I walk past a rough sleeper. They might not be sleeping rough, Obviously, you do have people that live in hostels. They've got no money. If they're living off universal credit, you've got nothing, and they've got in their mind they don't really have any prospects.
In terms of giving people money and that kind of thing. Because I know, obviously, like you said, it's important to remember, what would you do if you were homeless?
Yeah.
You might do drugs, you might turn to alcohol or whatever. And I guess maybe it says more about our society as a whole and our approach to narcotics, and that we kind of demonize people who take them or whatever. And we kind of say, well, that's the reason that you're homeless, is because you're taking heroin or you're taking meth, whatever.
It's not.
Yeah. But is that, what in that situation where people ask for money, do you think the right thing is to give what you can, or is it that the money actually perpetuates the problem?
I mean, it's down to the person, really. It's down to the person, what they can afford, what they can't afford, I mean, I would just say my advice would be just to look at them, or even just talk to them. Do you know what I mean? Because the worst thing about sleeping rough is people walking past you and ignoring you. And it's tough because, people have got their own shit going on in their life. So, you can understand why people would put their head down, especially if they can't afford to pay or anything. But imagine what that feels like for the person that sat on the street. The other day, I just gave someone a little bit of change, and he was crying his eyes out. And you don't know what someone's situation is. You just don't know. But you could actually just sit down and ask and talk to them and find out a bit more. Fair enough, some people might have an addiction, but as I say, you don't have to give them money. You can just give them food. The problem is I think people, rather than focusing on that, people really need to be focusing on, the local authorities that have funding, right, for these sorts of programs like recovery and stuff like that. People need to be contacting those people, or local councillors, and being outraged that the services that we've got in the city are just not working. Do you know what I mean? In terms of people recovering and stuff. And yes, fair enough, I've come through the system and I've recovered, but don't think it was the system and the support that did that. This was through my therapy. I've had a long-term therapist for 7 years, consistent, and people don't have any consistency, because when they go to these places, the staff move on, and it's tough for people, because really what you need if you're in recovery is consistency. Yeah. And really, you're just, they're Monday to Friday operations. What are you supposed to do at the weekend? And what are you supposed to do after 5 o'clock? You know, and that's the problem. Is we need people that are in our communities that are seeing this to really be sort of campaigning or getting involved and finding and just lobbying, sort of pressuring these organisations, the establishment, the councils, your MPs, just pressure them to change the system, because it's the system that's the problem. If we think about the NHS, let the NHS do what they do best. They do it best. They know how to help people. They know how to support people, and I'd really like to see some sort of merge between the NHS and our housing system and the recovery, because if you look at the opium wars that happened many years ago in China, they had a lot of people addicted to heroin, and they managed to get that under control. And I think us as a society, we can do that ourselves through taxation.
Yeah, I mean, I guess also as well, because obviously when we're recording this, like I think it was a week ago that the previous Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, said that homelessness was a lifestyle choice.
Yes.
I think
good luck to her. She's now gone.
She's now gone.
Plotting her return.
Exactly. Yeah. So in this like hypothetical situation that I'm gonna lay out, let's say we were to give every homeless person £10,000, or just money, to just live and do what they want, how far do you think that would go to solving the problem?
Definitely help, of course. I mean, you'll have some people watching you thinking they'll just blow it, but I don't believe that would be the case, because once you give people money, then they're able to do things. They're able to take part in activities or hobbies, maybe even just take a break, or do you know what I mean? But something just to get themselves refocused. If you want to go in to do a career, say for example you want to maybe become a bricklayer, you're going to need tools. That's going to take money. If you want to upskill and do a bit of education, then you might have to pay for a course. But you've got to pay deposits nowadays. It would definitely help people.
So you think giving the money would help?
Well, I mean, yes, it does. But I mean, again, really, we need to have a system where people can actually, recover and move forward, and that's the main thing. Yeah. Yes, you can help people on a day-to-day basis with bits and bobs. There are food banks. It's not like you can't get food in the city. You can. And just be careful as well, because obviously, some people do message you from social media, and I've been stung myself a few times, sort of lending money out, thinking that it will come back, and it doesn't. So if you are going to give money, just don't expect it back, pretty much. You know? But
So let's say for someone who is like unfortunate enough to be sleeping rough on the street, what is available to them to get out of that situation? Can you, because I think that really, I think, is the biggest source of ignorance in the general population, even in myself, because it's like, I think the actual pathway and even the difference between universal credit and benefits and all that stuff, like, can you just, let's say someone is on the street, they're unfortunate enough to be sleeping in a tent, what have we as a society built to get someone out of that?
The law's quite complicated as well around this, because the law, in order to qualify as priority need under homelessness, you need to be significantly more vulnerable than the average person that becomes homeless. So, and they sort of they sort of they measure that against. I don't know how they make this up, but they measure it against people that have got multiple issues when they're rough sleeping. So, which is sad, isn't it? Because you think, if you're a veteran, for example, you've gone to fight for your country in a war, and that person would end up living in a tent, in the middle of the city or wherever they want to stay. Normally because they've got a dog. They've got their friendly pal, and also because they don't want to live in the chaos of that. So a lot of those people probably wouldn't approach the council. They, the housing options for those people are just not relevant.
So,
not
almost
suitable.
the less vulnerable you are, the more likely you are to not be helped.
Yeah, I guess in some senses, yeah. If you're rough sleeping. What they say is you're supposed to notify what they call an organisation called Street Link, and you're supposed to put, it's an app, and you can just put the location where you've seen the rough sleeper, and then someone from the local authority or their services, because they all of this is privatised out, those services then come out and supposedly find that person and help them. But I've had cases where I've done that, told them where someone is and no one's turned up. I've had cases where people have been, I have known that people have been sleeping at a place for 2 nights in a row, and we brought in no second night out in Brighton Hove, where you shouldn't be sleeping for 2 nights sleeping rough, and there should be some sort of accommodation provided. But in theory, this doesn't happen, which is a shame, because what we read is... in reports, if you read reports, they've got empty, no second night out accommodation. So it makes you wonder, really, why we have rough sleepers when we've got empty properties, even council or temporary accommodation or these other ones. At the end of the day, we're giving tents out, or organisations are giving tents out because it's humanitarian. It's not nice to be sleeping. Under all this adverse weather, we do get lots of rain. We get storms here in Brighton. We get severe weather, like a couple of weeks ago. And what should happen is we should be opening up places where people can go and get shelter. And this isn't necessarily happening. It used to be that this would be someone in the local community who would see somebody and be able to tell them where they go. But now it's all secret. So, which is weird, because surely you'd want it to be known, but they don't want people to know because they say it encourages homelessness.
Okay, so just to essentially speak to the myth of the homelessness as a lifestyle choice, have you encountered people who do stick to the lifestyle? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, when you say the lifestyle, what you mean, how people perceive it, those people. Well, I mean, I have. I have. Like I said, I've been in that position myself. Do you know what I mean? I remember. If there's no support in and around for you, do you know what I mean? The risk is, if you are severely vulnerable, that you can go down that route. So, it does. I'm not saying it doesn't, because it does happen. I know people that are consistently back on the streets homeless because of an addiction issue, and they find themselves homeless again. And there is a case of that, but most people that present as homeless at Brighton Hove City Council have received a Section 21 eviction order from a private landlord,
which is also,
who are either selling their
fault,
property.
No
fault, but they're selling their property either because the interest rates have gone up now, for example, or the government have changed some rules around some money they were giving some landlords, or they're going down this Airbnb route. And obviously that's popular in Brighton because we've got, I think it's about 4,000 entire home rentals in Brighton Hove on Airbnb. So that's 4,000 properties.
Wow.
Yeah.
So someone who's on the street in that situation. So let's say someone points them out on this street app.
Yeah.
They're picked up by the council.
Yeah.
Then is the idea that they go to some form of shelter?
I mean, or charity will pick you up, and they'll put you under adult social care funding and rake in about $2,000 a month.
Yeah.
And they sit in that system for years.
Yeah, and then at that point, does the person have some form of shelter that they can?
Yeah, I mean, shelter. It's shelter, but it's not a life.
Yeah.
It's not. I mean, I don't think a lot of these people are qualified to deal with the people.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I'm certain of. You know, you get, and no disrespect to frontline workers, you know what I mean? They genuinely want to go and help. But if you haven't got a qualification or you've not got lived experience in something, then I just don't think you can connect with people in that way. Like, some people do need to be told. Some people need to be really sort of nurtured and helped. And I think if you've got lived experience, I think the chances of someone recovering and getting well are much higher than somebody that's, might have gone and got a degree in social care or something like that, but doesn't actually have a complete understanding of what the backgrounds or how people have grown up or anything like that. They've got no unique insight into that. So that's a really important reform that needs to happen within homelessness, this is nationally, by the way, this is not just local. We need to have, at the moment, if you're disabled and you meet the job spec for a role, you get a guaranteed job interview with councils or in the NHS. You get guaranteed. And I want to see something like that for people with lived experience. So I want to see targets where 25% of the frontline workforce are people that have got lived experience of homelessness, or it might be somebody that's come out of the prison system, and or it might be someone that's a care leaver, like been care experience, because their parents at the time was the local authority. And I'm getting cases, and I'm getting fucked off with it, but I'm getting cases where they're getting kicked out of the care service at 25, shoved out of the city to 40 miles away. And in January this year, some young kiddie, 25, care leaver, he killed himself with a probably, maybe accidentally, but it was drug related. And his family said he never had a drug issue before he went into these accommodations. And I'm concerned, and I'm just concerned that they're not, the way that it's done is essentially it's killing people. And we really need to reform that. And the only way we can do it is, I genuinely don't think someone with lived experience would have sent that person miles away.
I see. So if you could speak to the people nationally who make policy about homelessness, as someone who's dealt with 200 cases now at this point of
about 200,
and you've helped people get out of that situation and navigate the entire system. So you're the expert in this.
We need a mass council housing program in this country. We got to give local authorities the power to pause right to buy, which was the Thatcherite policy, which gave social housing tenants the option, council housing tenants the option to buy their property. And we need to pause that, because in Brighton we're lucky. We're actually quite lucky in Brighton, because we're actually increasing the number of council homes that we got, but we're losing the number of people at social rent, which is you pay a very, very reasonable rent. And that's quite concerning, because a lot of new properties that people are moving into, which are called council homes, the rents are a lot higher than what you'd know as the social rent. So we need a lot of house building. We obviously have over 600,000 empty properties in the UK. So I think we need to nationally, we need to give councils the power to introduce. So for Brighton, for example, we need a tourist tax in this city. If I go on holiday and I go to, say, Mallorca, on my hotel bill I'm paying a tourist tax. So why don't we do that here in Brighton Hove? And that could really help with aspects of homelessness. But also these landlords that are given the home used to be a family home. That's no longer a family home. That used to be occupied all year round. Now, those landlords that have taken that property out and turned that property into an Airbnb, short-term let, property empire, those landlords, we need to be putting across a levy, a tax on those landlords, because they've taken the residential property away from people. We need to be taxing them. So not only does the tourist get a small tax, nothing huge, just a little bit, a couple of pounds added on per night, but the real ones you go for is the entire home rentals. Don't worry about your average person that's got a spare room and they're hosting and they're just renting their room out to make a bit of money because of the cost of living crisis. We're not worried about those people. It's the ones that are depriving people from homes, and we've got to go for them. We need, as I said, we've got to invest in nationally, because we will go like America. If you go and have a look at America at the moment, in some ways, you do worry, because when you look at the streets, there is this visible issue with drugs, and it's not always related to homelessness. Most people that take drugs are not homeless. It's very wide in Brighton, but it can lead to homelessness. So we really want to, nationally, they need to really focus on drug recovery hubs all across the country, I think. Councils do need to have funding, so they need more funding in these areas, so they can so they can build these homes, so they can start reducing the number of private rented, the reliance on the private sector, and actually do it in-house. Because financially, it makes really good sense. If you're the council are already the biggest landlord in Brighton and Hove, they're the biggest landlord. They make huge amounts of rental income, and it just makes sense if they are the landlord, the main landlord, helping these people, and we see these people come through the system. There's so much stuff you could do.
Yeah, no, of course,
so much.
Of course. Yeah, it seems like you have a lot of ideas of stuff that could happen. I mean, I guess for me, the biggest thing that I've learned is that for this city in particular, Brighton and Hove, the fact that the homeless issue is because Brighton and Hove is good at dealing with homeless people compared to other places, rather than
they're not good at dealing with homelessness. The activists, the campaigners, the lobbyists, they've got good policies in. We've got good policies in that have been voted in over years. We're good because we've done that. What you've got is this resistant council, local authority, that are very resistant. This is a local authority, Brighton Hove City Council. They've got senior housing people resigning and writing on the HR review website stating that there's white privilege, there are issues with housing management, and they're leaving. And you've got to look at the work culture. It's a hostile environment. Yes, we've got laws in play, but like I said, those it's not the frontline workers, it'll be more the management, because they make the decisions. It's really controlled, and it's not a sort of environment that I'd want to work in, because if I was somebody that was fresh out of university thinking, I'm going to go and work at a local authority, I'm going to be a homeless officer, I'm going to help homeless people, you're actually not, because you're spending more time not helping people. My worry is, obviously, we've got some really great things in AI, I think. Artificial intelligence could really help in terms of productivity and helping people do things right if they do it properly at the council. As long as it's used to help people, it could be good. But I fear they might use it to not help people and to help them make negative decisions against people.
I see. That is really interesting. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I guess, what would you say for the day-to-day person, someone who encounters homeless people? Like, what is the best way to help someone who's not in the system but is just living their life, basically?
Yeah, so just helping them find a decent advocate, because it's really, really important. The laws are so complicated now. Anyone that's homeless and they're having to go against a negative decision against them, I just don't think they're going to be able to do it, because it's so complicated. So you do need an advocate, and there's not many of them out there. Most of the people that come to me, and there are 111 homelessness organisations in Brighton and Hove, and yet I still get people coming to me all the time saying they have nowhere else to turn. So how is that possible? And that's one of the concerning things, is the lack of access to things like legal aid to do these decisions. And, I worked out, because every person that I help, and we've had over 250 now.
250, well done.
Every person that I help, obviously I'm not claiming legal aid, so I'm not like a solicitor or a lawyer that's challenging decisions, and they get paid thousands and thousands of pounds from, the Justice Department. I'm not claiming that. So I've worked out I've saved the government over £1 million just by helping people off my own back. So I would encourage people that are recovering to actually get out into the community, a bit like myself, get involved in, homelessness organisations. We've got the Brighton Hove Housing Coalition in Brighton Hove, and we're a group of all non-statutory funded homelessness organisations. You've got Sussex Homeless Support that do their street kitchens. I just think you need to get involved in that, because one, you're meeting people like yourself, have been in similar situations. You can really learn a lot, and helping other people has been a recovery thing for me. Like, it's part of my recovery. It's tough because I'm so busy that it takes over my life. almost like the only thing I have in my life. Like sometimes I sort of almost neglect the personal side to my life, which is really important because you need to get balance. But I can't say no.
It seems like it's your passion.
Yeah, definitely is a passion. I love it. It's. I never thought of this where I would be, and my plan was to come out of this, and then what happened during COVID, it got so busy because we had all of that issue as well, which was just something else, that didn't happen, and I'm still there, and it's just getting busier and busier and busier. So, okay. Yeah, my advice would be just for people to get involved. You've got a big, massive health epidemic at the moment in homelessness, and just get involved, because the more people we have involved in lobbying, campaigning, and actively, trying to change the system, the faster they will do it. Yeah,
and I guess what I'd like to ask you then is, for the people who are in this situation, for the people who are going through the homelessness system, and for people probably who aren't in a good point in their lives, as someone who's been through that, what would you say to them?
Ring Shelter, because if you're homeless, Shelter can sort of give you they can point you in the direction to, like legal people that can physically help you. But no, just eat well, get a good foundation. You need to have a really good foundation to sort of recover, really. I am a bit worried for people because the mental health services are not amazing. People are stuck on waiting lists. I've had to go private, so I now have a private psychiatrist because in 7 years I went through 4 or 5 different clinical psychiatrists with Sussex Partnership Trust in Brighton. So that's a concern, because all they want to do is medicate people, give them strong antipsychotics, strong medication, and where's the holistic side, the therapy? Because if we can give people therapy, proper talking therapy, deal with any trauma they may have, if we can get people regulated, educate them, so they might not actually be educated if they've got something in their own background, like a diagnosis or something, but if we can educate them, if we can, get them well, so get them into gyms and, and really get them, teach people how to cook and, all these sort of like simple things. But if you can do that, then they've got a really good foundation to progress and to move on. There's a really good organisation in the UK, anyone UK-wide, especially anyone that is dealing with a homeless person, particularly refugees, because a lot of people don't think. But one of the good things about the government at the moment, they are now giving decisions for people that are asylum seekers and need, come here to get residency. They're now pushing these through. But the bad news is people are now homeless. So there's an organisation in the UK called Beam. Mm-hmm. And they're a crowdfunding platform, really, really good. And what you can do is you can refer people in to Beam, and they crowdfund, and they give people, they help people with education, getting into work, and they help people find an accommodation. So there are organisations out there. There are some really good ones in Brighton Hove. We've got Just Life. They're really good for supporting people on a one-to-one basis. They take people out shopping, give them food, so sort of like practical things. But you just need to you need to want to recover, but you also have to find the right support, and that's the concern. Is we're not getting the consistency with the NHS in mental health. Yeah, we need to be seeing that consistency, because the more consistency we have there, the faster people will recover, and what the government want people to be economically active. Then they can be economically active once they're well, but how can you expect people to do that when they're not well? Because they'll just end up homeless again.
Yeah. And so what do you think then is the biggest misunderstanding for people who aren't homeless?
Well, the blame, it's the worst bit is the blame on them. So it's almost like, well, you've got yourself into that situation, it's you're to blame. Mm-hmm. That's the worst part. That's the biggest myth, really. I mean, I know there's a lot of empathy out there for homeless people, particularly when it gets cold, because people are cold themselves. Mm-hmm. But not enough people are looking at the root causes, and that's where I want people to really be focusing on. And that's your governments who are, deliberately doing this. It's part of the system. If you've got billionaires that are not paying any tax, you've got to start asking yourselves a question: why are all these systems and services breaking down? Why are they falling? Why is our society structure breaking? So yeah, it's all right. Just sort of, blaming the average rough sleeper, or someone that's sleeping in a tent, or someone that looks like they're off their tits on the streets. But who's to blame for that?
Mm. And finally, how are things for you now?
Not amazing, but also amazing. It's a tough one because, as I said, I'm still in recovery. I some of the stuff that I find frustrating is I'm getting women coming to me that were in emergency accommodation hostels and they're getting raped, and so it's quite triggering what I do. It is triggering because you're back in that headspace again. But the good news for them is obviously because I've lived it and I've been through certain aspects, you know, coming to me is probably a good thing for them because I'm able to help them. You know, I'm able to point them towards different places, signposting they call it. And yeah, I'm in a position where I would like to sort of do something. So I'd like to set up my own organisation actually for people with lived experience, because I think these organisations like the councils and stuff, they're going to go kicking and screaming to stop people with lived experience coming in the system. So one thing that I want to do is bring people with lived experience together in their various different groups that they've got lived experience in, and we push and campaign for change nationally as well, because I think it'd be brilliant if we can have this as a national policy. All public sector organisations would be given a job interview guarantee for people with lived experience.
Yeah,
would transform things. But yeah, my plans are just to keep helping people, and we'll see where we go with that.
250 and counting.
Yeah,
man, you really, like, honestly.
I'm having a bit of a break at the moment, though.
Oh no, I mean, have a break, have as much time as you need.
You've got to recharge, because otherwise, you know, if you can't help yourself, you can't help others.
Exactly, but what you've done is absolutely incredible.
Thank you.
And I think you really need to give yourself credit for that, because coming from where you've come from, and now the fact that you can actually turn that around and pay it forward is honestly incredible.
Yep, and just have some perseverance. Anybody that's homeless, just persevere. If you think you're not getting anywhere, just persevere, because if you believe something and you believe something, you know, you deserve something, then it will happen.
Okay. And there's one last question I'd like to ask. Because I feel like that in the society that we live in, there's quite a lot of individual responsibility that we put on people. Like you've kind of just said there, perseverance, all that stuff. How much can one individual do to actually get themselves out of that situation?
They can absolutely do it. Look at me, I've done it. And it really only ever started once they put me in, once I secured local authority housing. It was a housing association first, but now it's becoming council. But having that security, that sort of that safe home, that's affordable, that's suitable, it's a really good sort of foundation to do that. So you know, we have a responsibility.
It's a combination between the individual.
Yeah, it is really. Yeah, it is. But you know, you do have to put it on the individual, and obviously they do need to want to recover. Do you know what I mean? So it is tough, because obviously if you have got an addiction and you're in that headspace where all you're thinking about is getting your next fix, that's going to be hard. But if we have drug consumption rooms in Brighton and Hove, then at least there's that medical aspect. It's not going to be this what it's like at the moment, and we're seeing it. So yeah, just little changes will go a long way to just, I think, make our whole society a happier place. Because if the people that are the most vulnerable are not happy, then that's a testament on our whole society. So let's improve that. You know, I'll do my own research. All of my clients, they do feedback surveys. They tell me a lot. And that's one of the scariest things that I get. And that's when I ask people, you know, how has homelessness affected you? Has it made your mental health better, worse? Is it the same? Everyone says worse. So if we could just change that one question and everyone says better, what difference would that make?
Of course. Well, thank you so much, Daniel.
No worries,
that has
Ricky.
been absolutely incredible. Do you want to tell the people where they can find you if anyone needs your help?
Yeah, so on social media, if you want to find me, you can just look on my tag name is @HousingDan. So I'm on YouTube. I'm also on Twitter or X, whatever they call it now. Yeah, and there's contact details and stuff on there. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much, and thank you, everyone. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.